You know, we have a ruling from a circuit court in D.C., but two constitutionalists, so-called, on the court, on this three-judge panel. The EPA has issued a massive regulation on greenhouse gases. Remember those? Now, if you've listened to this program, before, you know what greenhouse gases are. Without greenhouse gases, we have no atmosphere. And without an atmosphere, obviously, we're like Mars. Greenhouse gases used to be a nice phrase. When I was growing up, and even today, you would drive and you could see these little greenhouses, they called them. And you know what they grew in greenhouses, Mr. Producer? Plants. Because plants need carbon dioxide, a non-pollutant, to create oxygen. And we need carbon dioxide so plants can create oxygen through photosynthesis, and so we can breathe. And carbon dioxide is a minuscule fraction of the overall atmosphere, let alone greenhouse gases. Minuscule. You know what else is involved in greenhouse gases? Condensation. That's right. You know when it rains? You know how condensation is created? Well, that's part of greenhouse gases too. Moisture. They haven't figured out how to measure that, though, in the atmosphere and how to regulate it. Or how to turn that into a pollutant, too. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's never been. So we have really, between the regulators and the courts and the regulators, a truly remarkable thing going on. The Supreme Court ruled several years ago, 5-4 decision by, what was that idiot's name? John Paul Stevens, who since has left, that the EPA already has the statutory authority to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. Well, of course, when they passed the Clean Air Act, it had nothing to do with greenhouse gases. Certainly nothing to do with carbon dioxide, but that doesn't matter, even though it was passed in the 70s. The EPA jumped into action. The liberals tried to get Congress to pass a cap-and-trade program. Congress refused. Even the Senate refused. But that doesn't stop the left. If they can't get it the legitimate way, they go the illegitimate way. So because the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 decision, gave the EPA wide latitude, the EPA ran for the opening. And so the EPA was challenged by a number of groups and individuals, including me by my very name and Landmark Legal Foundation, as well as a number of other groups. And this three-judge panel that includes Rogers and Silberman ruled that nobody has standing. The EPA acted perfectly legitimately within its authority, and so the regulation is moving forward. Now, what does that mean to you? It means everything to you. Here's how the Hill newspaper wrote it. Ben Geman. Federal Appeals Court upheld EPA greenhouse gas regulations, a victory for the Obama administration that's also sure to inflame election year battles over the White House green agenda. Environmentalists heralded the three-judge panel's unanimous 82-page ruling leaves intact EPA's first-time regulations and authority to craft future rules to help combat global warming. So the Supreme Court, 5 justices, pervert the Clean Air Act. EPA runs for the opportunity to pervert it further. The Circuit Court, 3-judge panel, upholds the perversion, and here we are. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia upheld EPA's endangerment finding that greenhouse gases are a threat to human health and welfare, a finding that provides the underpinning for regulation of emissions from tailpipes and smokestacks and other sources. In other words, anything that uses fossil fuels will now theoretically be subject to EPA regulation. And nobody's talking about this case today. The court left intact EPA's rules on carbon emissions from automobiles and the tailoring rule that shields smaller stationary sources from greenhouse gas permitting that the EPA is using to target emissions from big sources like power plants. Knocking down the tailoring rule might have created a chaotic, uncertain path ahead for emissions regulations by opening up massive numbers of businesses and other facilities to regulation. This is a crock. Their foot is in the door. There won't be any tailoring rule once their foot's in the door and this is fully implemented. Everybody will be affected. You heard it here first, but you won't be surprised when it happens, will you? Every small business, every usage of a small device that uses natural resources, fuel, will be regulated for how much carbon dioxide, that is, more broadly, how much greenhouse gases it emits. All built on this false science. I'm fed up with these phony conservative judges. Fed up with them. They go along with this stuff. EPA and the Transportation Department have set joint carbon emissions and mileage standards for model years 2012, 2016, and are crafting rules for future years. I mean, I did a story yesterday, right, where OSHA's going after a shooting range in Illinois because of the noise in using, other than a .22 pistol. They use these health standards, environmental standards, employee standards to attack us. And when you defend yourself, you stand up against it, you're said to be supporting dirty air and dirty water and dirty food and all the rest, when it has nothing to do with any of that. They're trying to destroy our way of life. Those of you who own weapons, you like to go to the range, you like to hunt, you like to do a target shooter, you are being targeted by your government. Your weapons are being targeted. Your ammunition's being targeted. Those of you who run businesses or work for businesses that emit, smoke of any sort or gas of any sort, you're being targeted. You're under attack. You're under attack by the unelected bodies of our government, by the massive administrative state and the courts. They spit out these regulations and the courts give their stamp of approval. And the courts open the door to all this stuff. They're a lifetime appointment. They're not the only ones that have lifetime appointments, judges. So do bureaucrats, to be perfectly honest with you. So those elements of our government, they're unaffected by the public will, for the most part, cannot be reached at the ballot box. They are now setting policy. You know what this is? It's the old Soviet-style industrial planning by people who know nothing about industrial planning. And at least in the Soviet Union, as crazy as those morons were, they were trying to create more wheat, more cars. They were trying to quickly industrialize their country. Our morons are deindustrializing our country. This is why the middle class is rejecting the Obama administration. This is why Obama has to reach out to the extremes. Because he has to import voters. He has to create phony issues. He has to eviscerate the Constitution in order to win the election. I just want you to think about it, and we talk about this often. A second term with Obama as president. What the EPA will be doing then. What the Interior Department will, there's more on the Interior Department. What kind of judges will populate our courts? I want you to think about what's going to happen in this country. What about employment? What about entrepreneurship? What about taxes? I spoke today, and I never do this, or very, very rarely do this, to over 100 leaders of some of the biggest conservative groups in the country. And I told them what I've told you. That Mitt Romney has to be elected president because Obama has to be defeated. That this election is more consequential, it's even hard for me to say this, but it's true, than Reagan versus Carter. Even Carter wasn't hell-bent on destroying the Constitution. He was an idiot and a liberal. But he wasn't hell-bent on eviscerating our Constitution. Whatever the Supreme Court does in Obamacare tomorrow, I suspect they won't throw the whole law out, and that's what they should do. But whatever they do, we will analyze it. But I'm telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen, every part of the federal government is out of control. The executive branch, which includes the president, his cronies, and the administrative state, Congress is out of control, and the courts are out of control. And more and more and more, they conspire in their own way against the individual and the states. Well, they were supposed to check and balance each other. They don't. They rubber stamp each other. They help each other to consume more and more authority. Somebody asked me today at that event, they said, now, Mark, if we don't win the election, and if these things continue, how do you think we can reverse course? And I said, I don't think we can. The system is broken and it's being used against us. Now, I have to ask you, what is it under the Constitution, or where do we go? I keep hearing people come up with new legal theories. Well, we can go to this court, that court. No, we can't. Where do we go? What can we do? I'll be right back.